This is going to be a video on Armored Core Verdict Day from the perspective of somebody who played Armored Core 5 for 6 or 7 months. There's 3 factions this time around, and I'm assuming that you can switch factions during the end of the war, but I don't know about the middle of the war. Your team joins a faction like Chromehounds. I mean, this is a better design than what they previously had with teams just controlling territories instead of factions. It helps pretty much remove the imbalance of one team just controlling a lot of territories and things like that. Hopefully with a 3-faction design, there'll be less boosting and there'll also be more people being active playing the game, and games will hopefully be easier to find. Matchmaking will also contribute to this if it's improved. If not, it'll still be better than it was previously, but it still would not be that good. Also, before we really get into the gameplay, I'm going to mention one thing that I'm not going to be covering some of the more unimportant topics. I'm only going to be covering the things that I really consider important and should be talked about. This is the world map screen, and this time around, when territory gets taken, it's more of a faction thing than a team thing. So as you can see on the bottom left, when territory is getting lost from one faction, you're seeing the pie chart go up for one area. And as factions lose territory, like for instance the red faction on the top left and the left of the screen, it actually fades out and goes to a different color so you know that it's been taken. And each faction also has that bar that you see next to the names. And I'm assuming that's how much territory that faction has left in that area. I don't know if the design of fires is still in the game for if a territory is burning, or if they pretty much kept the whole territory AP design to where if your territory AP goes to 0 after getting attacked, that catches on fire and you have to defend it through conquest. They've also implemented season resets now to where it actually resets the whole map, and it's not just the territories on fire going to MOH. The whole map resets, everything starts at 0, so there's no team having dominance over one area for the whole, 5-6 months, something like that. The first gameplay that you see from the Armored Core 5 live stream, I mean, so far it looks like they've improved the graphics of the game. I don't see too many system changes, which is depressing because I'm still trying to find what makes this game worth $60. Compared to Armored Core 5, I mean, after the disappointment of Armored Core 5, I don't even think this game should be worth $60, honestly. It was the American version that had freezes. What else did they have? Freezes, lack of updates, a lot of bad things that just made people quit playing the game. So far, all I've seen from this video is just Armored Core 5 in a different setting. And they do show one mission-like encounter where, as you can see on the top right, they have 2 bars for the 2 factions. As you can see from the combat in this part of the video, they're still jumping off walls. The booster speed doesn't look that good. I mean, that doesn't look like much of an improvement from 5. I was hoping for something closer to 4 answer in terms of boosters, so that just shows me that it's still just like 5. And after you died in 5, you would have a guy who would walk around in a jetpack, and they kept that feature of the game in. They did improve on it a little bit, which they show later in the video. They give you a spectator mode now, which makes the experience more bearable. And they implemented screenshots, and I would rather have screenshots in spectator mode, which I really hope they have. I mean, screenshots are nice for something like that, but I've never found it, well, if they kept the glitch in where you could just get infinite height by mashing A after dying with that, then maybe I wouldn't mind that too much. Also, while on the topic of system changes, if anybody who's watching this played 4-Answer and also played Armored Core 4, could you please tell me what type of system changes that they had from 4 to 4-Answer that made 4-Answer worth buying? I mean, I heard it was the better version, but so far from this video, I haven't seen anything like system-wise that really makes this game look worth buying. Like, system change, I mean, the boosters look the same, the energy bar looks the same, the HUD looks the same, the mechs look the same. The only thing that's slightly improved is the graphics. Well, at least from what I can tell. I mean, maybe the gameplay that they show, which looks exactly like Armored Core 5, has improved drastically, and the network test will prove that. But unless I see some physical evidence of that, I just don't believe it. Another thing they showed during the live stream was the matchmaking system. Well, they showed a diagram of it, they didn't really show the matchmaking, which is kind of depressing. I want to know this time around if it's like search matchmaking or if it's still the same style that you had before where you had to host a conquest and people had to search for that conquest and you could drop out of queues. Pretty much have to restart the queue over and over again just to get a game, which probably wouldn't happen. I mean, I just wanted to where it's one button, it says defend or attack. You just click it, you're in queue for defense, you're in queue for attack, and it just pairs teams up like that. But with a live stream, I don't know, so I mean, that's open to speculation, unless somebody can read Japanese and just tell me what that looks like. This time around, they have medals in the game, and I feel like they included medals just to draw in more Chromehounds fans, even though this game is nothing like Chromehounds. I mean, if you want to play this game in a Chromehound style, you just have to turn off your boosters and not jump. Yeah, that'd pretty much be it. Oh, and not use the X button as well. And the medals, they actually look exactly like Chromehounds copied medals. You have medals for legs, just like Chromehounds did. I mean, that's supposed to be a lightweight bipedal medal, and Chromehounds had wheel legs, bipedals. They had medals for all of that. Section of the live stream, they finally get to the maps that you'll be playing for the game. New Frontier, Far East, Middle East, South Islands, Mid-Continent, South Frontier, and North Frontier. I'm kind of curious if they kept the old maps in the game. I mean, abandoned facility, mining sector, marine facility, huge canyon, alpine base. What else was there? Urban area, executive sector, and I think that's it. I mean, they might just have the same style for them, just like North Frontier A, B, C, D, H. I mean, I'm kind of curious if they still have the whole 10K, 1K, 0K concept too. Another thing with this being factions instead of being team-based, I'm kind of curious if one team could single-handedly lose you the war, which I'm sure they can. I mean, Chromehounds, I'm sure that if people wanted to boost that, they could. So I'm sure with the same design, if like one group of day one scrubs happen to get on the game and just lose your team the war, that could probably happen too. Right here, this is the first trailer for Armored Core Verdict Day, and it contains like 90% hype and 10% gameplay, which I don't like that formula whatsoever, but that's the formula they chose to go with for the trailer. I apologize for the lack of sound, but the video capture that I used to capture this live stream would not allow me to capture audio as well, so I just have video for this. But I did want to include the trailer, so here it is. I mean, they do show some big firefights here, which I'm sure is part of a story mission, or in my opinion, an order mission. And most people didn't like the story last time around because it practically was non-existent and just piss poor in general. But maybe they've improved that this time around. I mean, I bought Armored Core 5 originally for multiplayer, and that's what I was expecting. I didn't care about the storyline whatsoever, and I didn't even know that this game had, well, not this game, but the franchise in general had an okay story at some point. At least that's what I've heard. Armored Core 5, in my experience with the story, I personally thought the franchise just never focused on story at all. There really should be more gameplay that they show in this trailer, and the gameplay that they do show looks slow, and that's just depressing, honestly, for somebody who wants to buy this game. Well, depends. If they like slow gameplay, then yeah, they'd probably enjoy that. But if they were looking for Armored Core Verdict Day being something like For Answer, which I was really hoping for, it's not looking like anything close to that. It's looking even slower than 5 so far, which I really didn't think was possible, but yeah. Another thing they showed in that trailer was weapon switching, and as you can see from this screen, what they showed in the trailer for how you swap weapons in that nice cool looking screen is nothing like that. It's exactly like it was in Armored Core 5. We finally get to the spectator mode that I talked about earlier, and how you can actually spectate other people's screens when you die. So if you don't feel like just walking around with that guy in the jetpack, I mean, you can actually spectate now, which is a very big improvement in my opinion, instead of having to walk all the way back to watch people fight. Basically, they changed how you spec your weapons in Armored Core Verdict Day. In Armored Core 5, you could spec for power, you could spec for rapid fire, you could spec for accuracy, you could specialize for power, you could specialize for accuracy, and you could specialize for rapid fire without really much of a middle way. And in Armored Core Verdict Day, they have a point system instead, which pretty much allows you to manipulate what you're trying to spec for in a better way. And while that's good, if they still have the grinding system that they had before, where you have to grind your weapons to like 10 bars, I think it was, then I still don't like that change too much. I mean, it's better, but I kind of wanted it to be a static value. Like if you spec for power, there's just one value that you're going to get if you get to the max. Instead of getting screwed over by RNG and having to make 100 plus weapons just to get the type of weapon you want, and not have it end up with bad stats. At this part in the stream, they finally introduced the first new weapon, well, not weapon, but arm part in Armored Core Verdict Day, and it's a shield, which is something a lot of people wanted. And defensively, it could have some uses, honestly. I mean, if it has 3 defenses, I could see people trying to cover, like, mid-weights holes, like C and T with shields. I mean, you do lose damage because you're holding a shield in that arm and not a weapon that you could have had. It implements something that's defensive in the game, which there's not too much defensive stuff in this game. I mean, you have CIWS, and you have optical shaft, and I think that's it. So I mean, there's 3 now, 3 defensive like items in the game. That's never bad. I mean, the rest of the game's offensive. I mean, from a melee perspective, I don't see shields being too good because you have physical blades now, which probably will have the same range and don't hit targets. I mean, maybe if you had a lock on with a weapon and you could actually lunge toward them with the shield, but with how physical blades are and like heat pile drivers and stuff like that, I mean, defensively, I see it being useful, but offensively, not so much. I mean, with shields, there's the potential of equipping 2 shields as well, and I could probably see in duels somebody equipping 2 shields and 2 weapons to try to counter comp some things. I mean, that might be viable. You'd have to wait and see. But I mean, you could get rid of some defenses and stop some weapons with this, so it'll probably have a use for 2 shields in certain setups. The second new weapon in Armored Core Verdict Day is the heat machine gun. And I always wondered this because they could have had a CE/TE type of weapon for everything, like a CE shotgun, which I guess if you count heat howitzers, those are the closest you're going to get, and those were unviable. And stuff like that. I mean, pulse guns were like a TE shotgun, but I mean, they could have had like a CE pistol, a TE pistol, a CE sniper rifle. You could sort of count laser rifles as like a TE sniper rifle. I mean, I'm hoping they do this with more weapons. If they were to have a weapon of each type, it would generalize the game more, but I still think that would be better than the current state the game is in. I mean, you would have more weapons viable just because of that, instead of maybe 5 or 6 weapons that are completely viable. I mean, the main uses I could see for a CE machine gun would be against midweights, honestly. Well, it would murder lightweights and light reverse joints too for the people who run those, but those weren't too common in Armored Core 5, and I really don't expect that to change for Verdict Day, to be honest. And right here we have TE missiles now, plasma missiles, whatever you want to call them. The explosion that they have is pretty similar to plasma guns, and that effect was pretty blinding, honestly, if you got hit with those. I mean, as you can see, they still kept the nerf from pulse gun, well, not pulse guns and pulse machine guns that they had, where it's not as blinding as it used to be. So I'm glad they kept that in and didn't revert that, because it was hard to see through pulse machine gun spray. Another thing I'm curious with about TE missiles is if they have like a stealth missile type for TE, sort of like they do for CE, so you could have pretty much stealth TE missiles that go through CIWS. I mean, another thing with those is TE damage is pretty much explosive, so it doesn't have to hit you. So that can hit you through walls, through the ground, pretty much through any solid object in the game. And I'm kind of curious how they're going to balance that, because TE damage has explosive damage, and explosive damage is unscaled. It's pretty much why they had to nerf pulse guns and pulse machine guns multiple times. And they nerfed the unscaled damage from it every time. Next weapon they decided to add in Armored Core Verdict Day was more like a combat or a physical axe. I mean, whatever you really want to call it. I felt like this was unnecessary to add because you already had physical blades, and nobody uses them. They're one of the like most niche weapons in the game that never see any use. And combat axes pretty much destroy the niche physical blades had. They're longer physical blades. There's no reason, unless physical blades damage is higher, which it should be, because there's going to be more risk involved because you actually have to get even closer. I just don't see the point of this addition to the game because you had physical blades. Like that's just like longer physical blades with just a bigger blade. And with the third weapon that they introduced in the live stream, it's a sniper cannon. It doesn't look like one too because it's actually on the back, which is the bay unit. And that means they're allowing ready position weapons in bay units now. And I'm really curious how that change is going to go because tanks can equip ready position weapons and not have to actually go into ready position, so that if they allow that on bay units, that could be like tanks with 4 autocannons, tanks with 4 cannons, stuff like that. I mean, I like the fact that you can switch between ready position weapons now from the bay, but I mean, if you still have to go into ready position, and ready position still only increases your defenses from the front, and still has horrible sensitivity, depending on the weapon, because of scope magnification, I still don't see them being too viable. I mean, that's a cool transformation. I'll give it that. It's like some Gundam shit right there. But unless they seriously give the weapons a buff, like you can use them without having to go into ready position, or only equipped one, and not have to go into ready position, something that just doesn't deal with ready position, I could see them being a lot more viable and actually see play. I mean, they're showing the sniper cannon here, and that's nice, but that weapon doesn't have lock-on, so I rarely ever see anybody get a hit with it. I mean, it's more gimmicky. If it had like a long lock-on time, but could actually lock on, I think that weapon would be more viable, and people could just stand around people's subcomputers and try to use it. This time around, we have another ready position weapon that you can swap with your weapons in the front. And at first, the transformation was nice and all that. I thought maybe it's a new type of weapon, a different weapon. And then they said heat cannon, and I just like facepalmed right there because heat cannons were also one of the most unviable things in the game. And the reason for them being unviable was generally their muzzle velocity being one of the lowest. I mean, they do that with CE weapons, they give them low muzzle velocities, and KE generally has high muzzle velocities along with TE. But giving heat cannons 200 to 100 muzzle velocity was just fucked up beyond repair. I mean, you could be a tank charging at somebody and you probably still wouldn't get a hit with these things. And if you're going to tell me that those have to go into ready position again, I don't care how cool that transformation looks. I mean, that's just not going to get any hits. That's not going to be seen in the game aside from day one. I mean, unless they make some serious change to where you can just use those outside of ready position, those heat cannons are just going to be what they were in Armored Core 5, which was completely unviable. I don't even think I saw somebody legitimately try to use heat cannons in any free battle or conquest I've ever been in. Personally, this was my favorite part of the stream, because this showed me like the one weapon that looked interesting, in my opinion. And that was having like a ready position type missile. I mean, it's missiles as an arm part instead of as a shoulder unit. And as you can see on those missiles, like, the amount of missiles you can have on those is ridiculous. Per arm part for those missiles, that'd be 16. So if you had 2 of those like they have right there, that'd be 32 if they fire 1 for each. I really wanted to see gameplay of it too, but once again, with all these parts, aside from the TE missiles and the CE machine gun, they don't show any gameplay. What I really wanted to see from this is if it can get shot down by CIWS. I mean, you think it would be able to, because it's a missile, but I mean, maybe it's a different type of missile, maybe it doesn't register. Just like flash rockets don't register, but they're rockets, I guess, and they only shoot down missiles. One of the things I'm worried about, though, for this is if the game could actually handle it, because if any of you have played Conquest with vertical missiles and how that drops the frame rate of Armored Core 5 to like a standstill, or freezes the game, either one. I have a feeling if you had a team of 4 people who run around with stuff like that the game would freeze or just drop frames instantly. But they don't show gameplay, which might be why. So, I mean, personally, the fact that you could have 32 missiles per mech fired like that, I mean, that to me is ridiculous, because the max amount of missiles that you could fire in Armored Core 5 was 6 times 2, which was 12, because you could have six missiles lock on, and then you could have dual shoulder units to fire the missiles, and then you'd have to also have an FCS that could handle that. That's another thing I'm actually depressed about. They don't show any new FCSs. I mean, like maybe a new FCS type, maybe a new booster type, but maybe that's for like the next Armored Core video they show. And for the max amount of missiles that one team could fire at one time, if all of those missile slots can each fire one missile, would be 128, which I'm sure the game would freeze instantly if that amount was fired, and that's from one team of 4 people. That's not including the other team, if the other team was to run that. So if the other team was to run that, we'd just have to multiply it by 2 again, and it'd be 256. And I'm pretty damn sure if the game could not handle vertical missiles in Armored Core 5 and drop frames and froze, that if 256 missiles were fired plus vertical missiles, if they still have that style of conquest in, where you have turrets, instead of a team deathmatch style like I wish they had. The last weapon they show is laser cannon, and the laser cannon was one of the most viable ready position weapons. While they weren't very viable, it still did better than most of them because of the muzzle velocity, the damage, the charge time, the lock-on speed, pretty much everything. Oh, and scope magnification too. That was another big part of why it was viable. I personally feel like they didn't show ready position weapons, like gameplay of ready position weapons, because they knew they were still unviable and they didn't have a way to change that. And if they showed the heat cannon off, I swear that thing still wouldn't hit. It'd probably still have a muzzle velocity of 200, even though they could up it for a demonstration. Another part of the game that they decided to alter was operation files. And personally, I don't have too much experience with operation files. I almost never use them. I think I saved one in my entire life. That's not to say that people don't use them. I mean, I'm sure a lot of people have operation files and save them regularly. So, I mean, they're improved now. I mean, you can look at the people's weapons. You can see some new stuff that they display on the screen. I mean, if I know more about operation files in Armored Core 5, I could tell you what they changed, but all I can do is just show you the video because I didn't use operation files. They weren't really too much of an important part of the game. I mean, I had video capture, which is superior to operation files in every way. If operation files captured video completely, I'd use them. Well, no, I'm sure it'd lag like fucking theater, but I won't go into that. That's a different game. This is something that I didn't cover in the earlier parts of the video, but I still feel like I need to cover it. Conquest in Armored Core 5 was basically, it only had one game type, and that was Blitz. The only objectives you could do were either to kill all enemy players or destroy all helicopters, and the main objective was really to destroy all helicopters, so we played it in team deathmatch. Well, we played it in a team deathmatch fashion. I guess more of an honor code, whatever you want to call it. I'm kind of hoping that they don't have helicopters for Conquest if they keep that in, and they don't have turrets or anything like that. Just, I mean, I'd be perfectly happy with symmetrical maps, and just not even offense defense, just 4 mechs fighting 4 mechs, and that'd be it. Earlier I had said that the heat cannons were unviable, and while it's true I didn't give you an example of it, so I decided to actually go back to Armored Core 5 and record a video showing heat cannons on a training dummy. This shows that they can barely hit a target that's moving. I mean, maybe 1 out of 5 shots, and this is something that is moving very fast. On against actual players who move in unorthodox patterns, it's not going to hit. The main reason that it's so bad is just muzzle velocity. I mean, it has every other stat that it needs to be a good weapon. I mean, it has the lock-on speed, it has the power, the impact force, it has pretty much everything that it needs. Optimal range, well, no, optimal range could be better too, but it's generally just muzzle velocity for it. Another thing I'm going to show here is the sniper cannon, and it has a hell of a lot of problems in this game. It has a nice transformation in that video that they showed, but the main thing that's wrong with it is that it doesn't have a lock-on, and the fact that they showed it on a midweight, which doesn't have the stability to actually fire the gun straight. You could fire at a stationary target with a sniper cannon, and it's going to miss, as long as you're firing it on a midweight. The only things that can fire them and actually stay stable are tetrapods, and that's because of the bonus they get from going into ready position. Everything else cannot fire sniper cannons straight. I mean, even if they were on the bay unit, unless they change how much stability the legs give you, or just how much stability it takes to fire that weapon straight, it wouldn't matter what game it's on, it's just not going to hit anything. I mean, one of the reasons I wanted to see gameplay of the ready position weapons that they showed in the Bay unit is because for the sniper cannon, I wanted to see if they implemented a lock-on function for it, and I wanted to see if that mid-weight that they had right there could actually fire the gun straight. I mean, it's only really a problem with like maybe one or two weapons, just howitzers and sniper cannons, and maybe another one, but most of the other ready position weapons don't have that stability problem. Actually, there is one other ready position weapon that suffers heavily from stability issues. Well, not stability issues, just port design issues, and that's the autocannon. For any of you who've ever fired the autocannon on something that is not a tank and seen what happens to your screen, I want to know if they fixed that, where your screen just oscillates up and down and left and right, just like in some fucked up flickering fashion. They show a screen here where they're going to have the Japanese network test for the game. And if people make videos of the network test, we can have an accurate view of what the game will be like. Unless there's some serious major change after the network test. I mean, from what I've read, network tests are pretty similar to betas. They use things like this to test if their network can actually handle people playing the game, the servers, weapon imbalance, things they need to change about, like, just general feedback about the game. So I'm hoping some people complain about the game looking incredibly slow, booster speeds, things like that, not being able to travel up. At the end of Armored Core Verdict Day, the Death 1, they announced that they're going to be having another live stream, Armored Core Verdict Day, the Death 2, where they're probably going to go into more gameplay about the game, maybe story elements, more new parts. I mean, I'm hoping just more gameplay, honestly. Hopefully it'll be more than 10 minutes of gameplay this time.